Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Well, thanks for joining us today. We're covering the LMI exam federal investor entrepreneur self-employed work permits and how they can help you in terms of your work, what the eligibility are, and a high-level overview. And are there any PR paths for these work permit programs which the federal government is offering investors? With all the changes that have happened with the IRCC in 2024 and that they've implemented and are implementing, are there any opportunities for PR for these intercompany transfers, C10, C11 entrepreneurial investor work permits for Canada? As the PR routes are becoming more and more difficult going forward, as of August 2024 onwards, it is important to understand what is of it possible and what isn't. We'll go over the program overviews of these three very popular investor type entrepreneurial work permits and the differences between them and possible PR options, if any, for these three LMI exempt work permits. Of course, there's other LMI exempt work permits, but this should give you a pretty good idea of what's available. Like the rest of our videos, this is an uncensored, unedited live stream with no special effects and just the exposed truth as always. And keep in mind, we're going to be talking about startup visa in the next 2 weeks of all the changes that have happened and what are the changes that are going to come up, because the government is hinting towards something. And when they're hinting towards something, it means something big is happening. So we're going to have a special SUV session in the next 2 weeks. So tune in. Who am I? I'm Reza from Ingwe, Canada, licensed immigration practitioner, and our office helps businesses, entrepreneurs, and investors move across various borders. Why are we posting this video? Well, it's to share our hands-on immigration knowledge with our worldwide audience, including but not exclusive to existing clients, potential new applicants, immigration consultants, and agencies. If you're thinking about immigrating, we're here to help. Get a free email assessment with us by filling out the form down below, posted in the description of this video or this live stream after the live stream. And of course, if you're an active immigration practitioner, we can assist you with outsourcing your back office operations, including assessments, processing, pre and post signing support, and providing more options than just Canada for your clientele. Because we just don't do Canada or startup visa, although startup visa is one of our expertise. We are a solution provider for Canada, Panama, Portugal, Greece, New Zealand, Dubai, and Malta, being the lowest golden visa residency program in all of Europe. Um, let's jump into it. Keep in mind that all of these programs we're discussing are work permit only right now. So when we're talking about the C10, hey Samin 1346, when we're talking about C10 intercompany transfer, C11 entrepreneurial work permits, they're actually just work permit programs. They're not intended for PR. The government never designed them for permanent residency. However, in very special cases, it's possible to combine them with another program to become eligible for Canadian PR. But that depends on your eligibility, the business. There's a lot of factors involved. These programs are not for everyone, and we don't advise this to all of our clients to go through these programs and combine them with another one to convert to PR, because 80% will not be eligible, or it will be too difficult, too time consuming, or too expensive. So in those cases, we recommend entrepreneurial provincial programs or the startup visa programs or the fast track executive PR program. If you're investing, it's sort of an owner operator LMIA for executives and managers who are ready to invest and be sponsored by the business. But either way, it's important to understand the following programs and what options, if any, the C10 LMI exempt work permit, the C11, and the intercompany transfer can offer applicants. The C11 work permit is not intended for those looking to use it to start or manage an ongoing business in Canada. The RCC specifies this permit is designed for individuals seeking temporary, often seasonal, entry to manage their existing business, typically self-employed or entrepreneurs. So it basically means you own and operate a business, often without employing people even. But It could be that you would employ people for that project or that seasonality. And a lot of people mix up C10 and C11. C11 is short term. C10 is more like an established, they want to really establish a long term business. C11 is not. The C11 visa or work permit is based on the IRCC's regulation 205A, which is basically for nationals to create and maintain significant benefit or opportunities for Canadians. While the exact monetary value of the investment is not specified and is not the sole consideration for C11, the benefit must be assessed on a case-by-case basis, depending on the industry, type of business nature, social and cultural and economic. So it's not about money. It can be social, cultural, event-based, right? There's a million other things besides money, but it's got to be legit. Examples for C11 could be food trucks, seasonal stands or events like, at events, like say during the summer or winter, managing short-term accommodations, seasonal things, rentals, tourist destinations, guided services, um, campsites, who knows? It could be anything seasonal or short-term. Use your imagination. Additionally, self-employed individuals such as uh, authors, writers, musicians, artists, athletes may use this to come to Canada temporarily, right? So you're coming in for a gig, right? Maybe you're working, you're self-employed, right? And you're just coming in, and you might be getting paid to do something. But there's for the entertainment industry, that they have a whole slew of other work permit programs that are LMI exempt as well. So C11 could be one option, but it depends on your specific case. And remember, folks, one program doesn't fit all. This is not a cookie cutter, let's apply this to everyone. To qualify for the C11 LMI exam work permit, you must own more than 50% of the business or operations and typically operate as a sole proprietorship or maybe even a provincial business with limited seasonal staff. C11 is not suited for starting long-term businesses, looking at PR options, right? Or extending to stay for PR later on. It has to be definitely temporary, okay? And of course, significant benefit. Let's look at the C10 now. That was C11. This is all LMI exempt entrepreneurial work permits for significant benefit for Canada. The C10 is for long-term investors. So if you're an investor or entrepreneur who wants to bypass the provincial entrepreneur program or to start a visa, or you don't care about PR and you just want to start a business as a self-employed or entrepreneur, could be starting a business, it could be buying a business, it could be a combination of both. No restrictions. Your country may lack a bilateral agreement with Canada, like the US, Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Europe, Australia, UK. All these places have bilateral agreements, but if yours doesn't, then you could be looking at the C11 work authorization to come in as an entrepreneur's investor to bring in either social, cultural, or economic benefit to Canada. This might be in terms of creating jobs, serving underrepresented areas or underserviced areas, or bringing some kind of social cultural benefit, whatever that is. The C10 LMI exam work allows for establishing long-term business in Canada, although it is not a pathway to permanent residency, as we mentioned. It can be used in conjunction with other programs, potentially based on your eligibility and your business to combine for APR. The application is assessed based on your individual entrepreneurial investor profile. So unlike Intra-Company Transfer, C10, they look at your profile, the applicant. Are you an investor? Are you some Joe Blow who's never owned or managed a business, right? And this looks suspicious. You got to own 50% or more of the business that you're planning to set up or invest in Canada. Under the C10, creating or maintaining significant benefit in Canada is required under the regulation 205 subsection A. And again, it can be social, cultural, or economic, or a combination. So it doesn't have to be all about money, but of course, that's a big factor. Money being hiring people, investing. So for example, a $50,000 investment in a specialized artisan workshop in a small town outside of the big cities might be okay, maybe, right? But you got to show real ties to that community. You've done your research, you've done it, right? Or a $300,000 high-end retail store I would say even $450,000-$500,000 high-end retail store in Toronto or Vancouver could work, right? Or could not work. 300,000 is too low. I would say 500 to 800,000, because even when you want to do a high-end restaurant, you will invest up to $1 million. So if you're looking at Vancouver, Toronto, the major metropolitan areas, even Ottawa, investing under 500,000, I don't think we'll cut it unless we're talking about social cultural benefits. And it's got to be tangible, it's got to be clear, and there has to be a track record of it, not just out of the blue. You've never done it before, now you're bringing social cultural benefits. It's not going to work. For your CTLMI exam work permit application, officers will evaluate whether the business will likely provide economic stimulus, create jobs for Canadians, your language skills to operate the business, or maybe you've hired somebody to be a translator or assistant to help you manage the business. And your background, again, it's not about the business, it's about you as well. Do you have experience as an entrepreneur, investor, senior manager? Do you have the expertise to successfully start, invest, or manage, or a combination of this business in Canada? Of course, evidence of financial commitment and progress in starting the business, meaning money, quote unquote, at risk in Canada, is paramount to the success of the case. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out to us. We'd be happy to assist. However, we are only doing business and investment migration. So if you're looking at these types of programs, we know the exact formula for success. It's not pretty, but we know exactly what the officers are looking for. Because if you've never visited Canada, if you've never done business in Canada with a supplier, with customer, whatever, and suddenly you're like, hey, I'm going to buy an ice cream shop and I want to come to Canada. Well, that's not going to look good. Okay. Avoid standard business ideas, right? Like, oh, I'm coming here and starting a digital marketing agency, and I'm going to hire 3 contractors, and it'll just be me on payroll in Toronto or Vancouver or Ottawa or whatever, Calgary. Well, yeah, that's not great. Okay. You could spin it around, be creative. Don't be just doing the plain vanilla business plans. Folks, 90% of those business plans that immigration consultants and lawyers spit out to the IRCC, ChatGPT could probably do better. They're probably using ChatGPT if they know what they're doing. But I'm just telling you, be creative. Show some uniqueness, some genuineness in the application to get a chance. Because imagine these officers see 100 of these cases a month. Hundreds. It's the same BS on and on. Of course, they're going to read through the BS and then they're going to figure out, this is all the same spiel. I don't believe this guy. But if you've done everything, you've gone that extra mile, you have that genuineness, you've got the research, you've got those ties to Canada, whether you visited here, you have a joint venture partner, you've done business before, or you're planning to, these are the keys to success, okay? It's all about the formula. If you got the variables correct into that formula for your C10, 11, or ICT work permit, then you could be 80, 90 even percent plus approved. But if you're not, well, you're going to be in that 50% or 60% refusal rate. So instead of operating a typical cafe in a large city, consider doing a cafe in a smaller community, right? Or doing something interesting with the cafe. Maybe it's a workshop, maybe it's a learning type arrangement. Who knows? Starting an IT consulting firm in a major city. Again, not the brightest idea, but partnering with the school to provide education internships, maybe a hands-on workshop that can increase transfer of skills, local employment, and not the big cities, maybe a little bit outside. That could help. Ultimately, the focus is how your business will benefit Canada and support the economy and the social cultural environment here and the people living here. A unique business addresses specific opportunity needs or contributes significantly to regional development in whatever aspect or lens that you're looking at. Let's look at the Intra-Company Transfer. Okay, the Intra-Company Transfer is a popular LMI exam work permit for businesses, no matter where they are, transferring key employees between in and out of Canada. Okay. So it could be a Canadian company transferring somebody over from overseas from one of their branches. It could be an overseas company setting up a branch or affiliate or subsidiary inside Canada to transfer over a key staff, knowledge staff, or executive or manager or entrepreneur through that program, right? But it's got to be existing operation. The ICT program, previously known as C12 LMI exempt code, is now categorized as C61, 62, or C63. These are just codes, folks. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize them. C61 is used when employees are starting a branch or affiliate in Canada. So you're an employee, you don't own the business, they've given you a mandate to come and start. C62 is for executive senior managers and functional managers. So it means usually the owners or the top managers, whether you're a shareholder or not, doesn't matter, but that's a huge portion of the ICTs is C62. And C63 is specialized knowledge staff. And where I see that is with Canadian companies, where Canadian companies who are bringing in key staff from one of their overseas operations, or hey, they've been hired and the person is working in an overseas, even if it's not a huge operation, but they've been working for minimum 1 year or more on payroll. This Canadian company inside Canada wants to bring that staff over, and they've got specialized knowledge. And IRCC CBSA officers have specific instructions of what they mean by specialized knowledge staff. It's very specific. So what are the key differences between C10, 11, and the intercompany transfer, which can be to any of those three LMI exam work permits that we've just covered? It's all the same program for the ICT, no matter if you use C61, C62, or C63. But now let's look at ICT versus C10 and C11. Eligibility. The ICT will focus on the company qualifications, not the person. C10 is based on the person, the investor's profile, and so is C11. Okay, very individual focused. What's the next comparison? Investment source. The investment source for intercompany transfer has to be from the company, not the individual, not the shareholder even, the company. C10 has to be from the individual entrepreneur. C11, same thing. Business duration. ICT allows an establishment and work permit renewals up to 7 years. C10 for long-term businesses is more limited, but it allows renewals ongoing. C11 is short-term or seasonal. So if you're looking for 2-3 years, it's not going to work with C11. I would say 6 months, maybe a year, right? Company requirements. Well, ICT requires an established company, whether in Canada or overseas. C10, there's no requirement. It's based on the investor, individual. C11, the same thing. Significant benefit. They're all the same. The intercompany transfer, C10, C11. Significant benefit socially, culturally, or economically, unless there's a bilateral agreement, in which case, if there's an intercompany transfer, right, a bilateral agreement between Canada, US, for US citizens, Mexican citizens, Chile, um, um, Colombia, right, Korea, Australia, Europe, UK, right? So there's a whole bunch of countries that have bilateral agreements, which allow intercompany transfers without bringing significant benefit because there's bilateral agreements in place. If you have bilateral agreements between your country and Canada, you can also look at the investor category if it's available, which means you could go through the investor category instead of the C10, C11. Let's look at previous business ownership experience requirements. Well, in the intercompany transfer, it's not required. The business is important, and then the person who's coming over has to have worked for at least 1 year on payroll or some kind of remuneration to be qualified under ICT. C10, C11, there's no previous business ownership experience that is mandatory, but they're going to look at it. So it's kind of like startup visa. There's a lot of things that are not mandatory, but they want it. 7, applicant capacity. The ICT allows transfer key executives of staff with a focus on maintaining a high ratio of Canadian staff in the Canadian operations, not foreigners. C10 is just the individual entrepreneur or his organization. C11, self-employed persons managing seasonal short-term operations, right? So as you can understand, intercompany transfer, you got to have more of an established business, payroll, people. It's gotta look like really good, right? The company. C10, C11 is about you, not the company. Okay. If you're the best entrepreneur in the world, but your companies are not huge, well, ICT may not be the case. Again, if you've got a grocery store with 3 people, you've got a little agency with 3 people on payroll, again, ICT is not going to be your best shot. PR pathways. So what are the PR pathways? None offer a direct PR pathway, as we discussed previously in the beginning of the session. These are work permit based programs, LMI exempt federal work permits. And remember, they're available all across Canada. So inside Quebec, outside of Quebec, Intra-Company Transfer, C10, C11, there's no restrictions, but they're not PR programs, right? So if you want to convert, got to combine it with another program like Express Entry. I know some of you dread that word, Express Entry. It's like mission impossible. But if you're holding this work permit and you're paying yourself, let's say, for 1 year through payroll from this business, then you could potentially claim work permit job offer points under the Express Entry system. Okay, but again, you've got to see, do you have enough points? Can you get 540, 550 points in Express Entry? You would need a very good language score to be eligible and to be competitive. Eligibility is one thing, competitiveness is another. You must have shown that you have been paid by the company specified in the work permit, which may be your company or you could be an executive, for at least 12 months. And of course, have enough points to be competitive, because the job offer points after 1 year can be claimed with an LMI exempt work permit as long as you've been on payroll. Okay, whether it's 50 points or 200 depends on your business and your role and your duties. And the Canadian, if you own or if you own more than 50% or close to 50% of the business, then you will be evaluated under the Federal Skilled Worker Program. So you cannot claim Canadian work experience. But if you don't own the business directly or indirectly, then you could claim Canadian work experience and the job offer points, right? The job offer points can be in tier 0, 1, 2, or 3, right? And the high level ones are 000, 12 to 15. The knock codes are those 200 points, which are just for VPs, CEO, COO, C-level, executive, and directors. But your business has to be justifiably large enough to justify these roles, because these salaries are $80,000 to $110,000. So if you've got a 1 or 2 man operation, it's not going to fly. Maybe it did 10 years ago, not now. Payroll structures definitely need to be there. Spouse or common law partners, of course, they could potentially be your Express Entry route if you're not eligible, and they could work for your business. But again, your spouse working there, they probably won't be able to claim Canadian work experience points, because the officer may doubt that they're your spouse and you own the business. But you could still do federal skilled worker, and they could claim job offer points. But again, it depends. Do they have the LMI exempt work permit? If they have an open work permit, you'd actually have to do an LMI for them. Okay. Nomination by another company. If other options are not viable, you could consider being just sponsored by another company through a provincial nominee program or regional program, or maybe become an investor, maybe buy into a business and join your businesses because you're saying, hey, Express Entry is not for me. The provincial nominee programs are definitely there. They're very difficult these days, folks. I got to be honest with you, they're very difficult. And of course, you got to be very courageous to take this route for PR at this point. If you don't have a clear plan for PR through any of these programs, you haven't calculated your Express Entry points, you haven't calculated how you will structure everything when you're here to obtain PR, I do not recommend doing this. Okay? Either you know what you're doing or you don't. So don't try to make sushi if you've never made it before. That's my point of view. So if you're thinking about immigrating temporarily, permanently, we're here to help. I can guarantee you only one point. What is that one point? I forgot. I think, okay, the one point is I know what I'm doing. No, I'm just kidding. We'll be there for you. So if you get bad news, good news, whatever news, we'll be there. We will not disappear. Okay, we will always keep you informed, and we will always work with you, and to make sure that you obtain your goals if possible. You're in full control of the program, which program you choose based on your eligibility, because we give you all the options and then you decide. We've got a $1 million liability insurance which protects you and us from fraud or mistakes. and a dedicated client trust account with our Canadian banking institutions. Our team speaks 10 languages and we help applicants from 50 different countries, 55 now, in the immigration process. Get a free email assessment for eligible applicants. And again, we're talking investors, entrepreneurs, professionals like that. We are not doing skilled workers or education, just so you're aware. And if you're ready to apply and would like a one-on-one session with me or my licensed team members, you can book a session using the consultation link below this video during the time of the posting. And if you want to take our immigration knowledge for test drive because you're like, hey, how do I know you know what you're talking about? Well, come on to our YouTube live channel every week because we've got a live stream going on. Okay, folks, we got a lot of questions. Samin 1346, thanks for joining us. You're the first one in the session. Safa, nice to see you again as well, Safa. Great. Looking forward to that good news. What did you say? I'm concerned about the business idea and it's profitable after arriving in Canada. Do you think changing the business idea immediately upon arrival will affect my PR status? In other words, how does IRCC validate the startup process after arriving in Canada, particularly for PR holders? Okay. So that's a great question, Safa. After your PR, you can change your mind. Okay, so you say, hey, this business is not viable. I'm changing it, I'm switching, I'm closing it down, I'm restarting. Hey, maybe I got a job at Microsoft. It's better than starting a business, right? So there's no real restrictions afterwards. As long as your intentions change genuinely, nobody can hold you accountable that, hey, you promised to do, because the PR is not conditional. After the permanent residency, you have the Charters of Freedoms and Rights for Canadians, which does not allow anyone to come in and say, why didn't you do this? Well, that was your intention, but maybe it didn't work out. Maybe your company was not creating the revenue. Maybe the Canadian market rejected that product or solution or service. So you just decide to do something else, no matter what it is. The only program that they have to check what happens with PR applicants afterwards is there's a report that the designated organization sends to the IRCC, I think once a year, of all the post-landing cases. What have they done? Have they met? What's the progress on these startups? That's it. There's